Griff, for more insight on the unprecedented indictment of former President Donald Trump, we're going to be joined now by Brian Claypool, an attorney whose expertise we hope to glean some insight from. Brian, there's been so much discussion about this as an overreach and probably something that will end up being too flimsy of a case to try. Is that premature for people to be making statements that are that absolute? Or is it likely that we might learn something more when the indictment is unsealed?
Yeah, hey, Jackie, great to be with you. I mean, this does appear to be a political witch hunt. Why? Because if that were you or me that was alleged to have committed a misdemeanor on a business entry, on an accounting sheet, rest assured that we would not be prosecuted. And look, Alvin Bragg has a history of being radical. He campaigned on the premise that, we're going to go easy on criminals, just like our DA out here in Los Angeles. So on the surface, it does look like he's targeting Trump. Now let's look at the potential merits of the case. I know exactly the penal code that Bragg is going to be relying on. It's New York Penal Code 175 and 175.1. What is that? It's basically two versions of bookkeeper fraud, Jackie. 175 is a misdemeanor. That's what you just reported. He'd have to prove that Trump ordered somebody to put a false entry on a book sheet with an intent to defraud. That's hard to prove because you're going to need evidence that Trump actually instructed somebody to make that entry. He's not dumb enough to put that in writing. And then secondly, he's going to have to prove intent to defraud. Really, really difficult to prove in a criminal arena. Let's move to the second one that's a felony. So this is the felony that he's trying to upgrade it to. It's 175.10. He would have to prove two crimes in one. That's what you just reported, what Barr's talking about. He'd have to prove that Trump ordered somebody with an intent to defraud to put a fraudulent statement, this $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, and he did it with an intent to commit a second crime, which is the elections campaign fraud violation. That is going to be virtually impossible to prove because Bragg doesn't even have jurisdiction to go after the campaign election charge because that's a federal crime and this is a state court. So it's virtually impossible for him to prove that felony.
So if this is such a tough case for him to make, why is he bringing it?
Well, I think there's no question about it that he wants to humiliate Trump. Why am I saying that? Look, let's be clear here. This payment to Stormy Daniels isn't illegal. It was made in 2016, Jackie, and then the feds came in, Department of Justice investigated. They didn't even find a crime. They let it go in 2019. Why would a city prosecutor then wait, Jackie? Let's see. We'll wait another 3 years or almost 4 years to revive this alleged crime because there's an election coming up. Trump wants to run. He wants to get that mugshot of Trump, and he wants to use this to try to prevent Trump from being reelected. It really, really is an abuse of power.
Well, it's not just Alvin Bragg, though, who decided to bring this case. I mean, he was indicted by a grand jury. So do you think that the case was strong enough that everyone in that grand jury was making their own judgment and arrived at that conclusion on their own, or do you think they just had a biased jury pool?
Yeah, Jackie, look, grand juries are very loose and flimsy. I mean, you've heard that phrase, you could indict a Swiss cheese sandwich. I mean, it was clear to me that Bragg was controlling the narrative in this grand jury. Why? Because it was reported about a week ago that he was going to be indicted. That's not how a grand jury works, Jackie. It's supposed to be cloaked in secrecy. It's supposed to be
just devil's advocate, other side of the equation here, because we don't know. The former president was the one who announced that he was going to be arrested, and there's a lot of reporting to suggest that all of this happening to him is only going to galvanize support for him. It sort of makes the narrative that he's been saying all along about government overreach. So we don't know where the leak came from, but both sides kind of have the incentive to get it out there.
Well, I think President Trump was responding, Jackie, to reports that he was going to be indicted. But back to your other point, look, in a grand jury, I hope that Alvin Bragg explained to that grand jury that that there would need to be proof of intent to defraud. He orders somebody to make the entry, and he's trying to commit a campaign election violation. That's really, really hard to prove, Jackie. And then you've got a statute of limitations issue.
Yeah.
It's 2 years on the misdemeanor, 3 years on the felony. And if I'm Trump's lawyers, the first thing I'm going to do is try to accuse the judge. It's the same judge, by the way, Jackie, that handled the Trump Organization criminal proceeding in 2021. After you deal with the judge issue, I'd file a motion to dismiss all of these charges, lack of jurisdiction, statute of limitations. So look, at the end of the day, anybody can be charged with a crime. You can indict somebody for a crime, but it's a far stretch to turn that into an actual conviction. And Bragg has a hard road ahead.
Well, it's certainly uncharted waters that we're in right now, and unclear where we're headed. So we will continue to watch it. Brian Claypool, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jackie.